of all, I had the privilege to attend Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, and they were talking about a report that was released by WHO, the first time in over 50 years that WHO released a 215-page report that I'm still reading on hearing loss throughout the world. And it's an interesting read. Oddly enough, 1 in 6 are affected, yet nobody sees, yet it's the least funded healthcare system in the world. Take that for what it's worth. I also want to send a special thanks out to today being International Women's Day. A special thanks to all the women that are not only working in this organization, but those that are working behind the scenes, those that, I don't know, those in leadership. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today. You deserve a day to celebrate, and I hope if you haven't taken that today, that you will. Okay, so I hereby call the meeting of the Yarmouth Town Association Accessibility Group to order. It's currently 7:05, and I hope to be out of here by 8:35, so let's try and move through this. I'm going to ask just quickly if Sherry would chime in on record of attendance. Does she have it? Does she need any help with that?
Thank you, Steve. There are 2 people who I can't see on the bottom left, and I'm not used to this method of keeping track.
Okay,
And I don't even see initials. I just see +2. So far I have Councillor Derek Lesser, Steve Nickel, myself, Lori, Tracy, Tanya, Peter, Natalie, and Mike. And if I'm missing you, could you just let me know, please?
Hi team, François Canadar, new hire at town.
Merci beaucoup.
Quite welcome. Bienvenue.
Okay, so do you have that?
Yep, very good.
Absence and regrets. I think the only one missing from within our committee is Jane. Is that correct?
I
Second
believe
of all,
so. I believe
declaration of conflict of interest. This is a new one to me, but it's my understanding that if any of the topics bring up a conflict of interest for you, please say so at the time. You'll, if necessary, I'll excuse you from voting, not necessarily excuse you from discussion. The next one that I have is the approval of the agenda. I assume everyone's had a chance to go through the agenda. Some things may be unclear, and they'll come clearer as we discuss them. Does anybody have any comments, concerns, or questions on the agenda? Okay, then I hereby will ask for a motion to approve the agenda as it stands. I have an approval from Derek. Can I get a second? Anybody?
François, I'll second the agenda.
I have a second from Sherry. Okay, from here we're going to move on to the minutes from the last meeting, if you would, Sherry, please.
So the minutes from the previous meeting were circulated earlier this week. Were there any, is it standard to review those or just approve them, or motion to approve them?
Yeah, whether any is standard to review, they're just.
If there's no changes.
there any irregularities in the approval of the agenda or the reading or any of the last minutes? Minutes from the last meeting?
No, I just reading on the screen here, Francois is not part of the board, so he actually seconded, I think, the agenda, so we might have to go back to that one and have somebody second it.
Actually, the first and second was by Sherry. Who was the
perfect.
first?
I was the first, and then
Actually,
Sherry
you
was the second.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. We'll go back within the committee board, within the committee members. Can I have a first for approval of the agenda? Anybody? Tracy?
So moved.
Sherry? Peter?
Did Derek first it?
Derek, to answer Tanya's question, yes, Derek did, but he can't.
Oh. Well, I can go ahead with that then, Stephen. Tanya.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chair Stephen.
Yes.
Councillor Derek and Councillor Gill are both voting members.
Are both okay?
Yeah, it's just that staff cannot vote.
Okay. That's perfect. Then we have that cleared up and we can move on. Minutes from the last meeting. Are there any questions or concerns around that? No. Okay. Can I ask for a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting? I have Derek for one. Can I have a second?
I'll second it, Tanya.
Okay, thank you. Now, moving right along. Let's go into new business under, and we'll turn this over to Natalie. There was a slight adjustment to our policy, and I'll let Natalie explain 7A.
So we had to make an amendment, a small amendment to the Accessibility Advisory Committee policy. Basically, it was to remove that the committee reported to the committee of the whole and that they should be reporting to council. So it was just changing out any language that said committee of the whole to council.
Thank you, Natalie. 7B, bear with me here. If you're on a computer, go ahead and open that link called Learning Together, and that will bring up essentially what is going to be our manual for how things are going to come about and how things are going to be done and run, sort of a manual of a plan of what we're going to be looking at. There are 6 areas that we're going to be looking at. I'm going to go through them very briefly. Number 1 is goods and services, basically in accordance to what goods and services the town offers and how they are affected by accessibility, and naturally, are they in line with the standards of the Accessibility Acts. Information and communication, we're going to get into this a little bit in 7C. Basically here, how are we going to get our message out? Who needs to hear our message? And how is that going to be done? And what is the 3 points that we want to get out as a committee to the public? And how are we going to receive that information back and process it? We're going to talk more about that in the communication plan that Mike's going to cover in just a bit here. Number 3, transportation. Naturally, we need to look at the transportation services. Mainly this includes the town bus, maybe the cabs as they come around. We'll look at that, but also the sidewalks, parking ability, various aspects that come with transportation we'll be looking at. Employment. I'm not really sure where this is going to head into, but basically we need to look at how we can encourage, support, and educate our public businesses within Yarmouth to support people with special needs, as well as hire people with, well, sorry, I don't want to use the word special needs, people with accessibility issues, as how we can best support them. And if need be, or if possible, hire them. I know I am a person with hearing loss and other accessibility issues, shall we say, and my employer has done a very good job at meeting my needs. I'd like to see that transferred into our small businesses within Yarmouth within the town of Yarmouth, if all throughout the province. Additionally, we're going to look at, and this is going to be the first stage of our plan, we're going to look at the built environment. Basically, this refers to the towns, the buildings that are under the town scope of care. You'll see a list for that later under our audits. Jane is actually going to be heading this up with our town inspector, and of course with Natalie. Natalie's right on the ball with everything. And we'll talk more about phase 1 in another section to come. Education. This is another scope that we'll look at. The schools are basically out of our town, out of our scope, because they are run by the province. However, in our communication procedures and process and hearing from the public, if an education concern comes up, naturally we want to hear about it, and we'll do our best to make reference to the appropriate departments to address the issue. But education also falls on educating the public, the town, the businesses within the town on how best to assess their business on accessibility issues. Okay, that's what I have under Learning Together. If you haven't read that plan, I strongly, strongly, strongly suggest you do read it. It's a good read, and it's going to be what we're going to be talking about in this next few months. 7, communication plan. I'm going to turn that over to Mike. Just before I do, my thoughts on this, Mike, are to form a subcommittee of 2 members of our committee to help you with that. How do you feel about that?
I think we're on the same page, Stephen, for sure. And I did speak to Natalie a bit about this leading up to this meeting. So building a communications plan in this case, I think having a subcommittee is a really good idea. I don't really think it's something best done by myself, given the importance of this topic. And it's going to need to be a pretty comprehensive communications plan. So having a team to work on that is, in my opinion, a good idea. I see, at least right now, I see sort of 2 short-term key goals that I think we need to be thinking about as a subcommittee is formed, and we're building a communications plan. And of course, we can work through this and blow it out a bit more once we have that team put together. But number 1, we need to inform the community on what we're doing. We've already started doing that by holding these meetings and posting the videos, building that get involved page with a bit of information, which we will populate with more content as we go. We need to be updating the community on what the work is that we're doing so that they understand what the scope is, and then providing updates on some of these developments as we go along. As we work towards building that accessibility plan, we need to let people know what we're doing and where we are, generate some interest around it. So that's important, but also important is that we engage the community for input. And building that accessibility plan, in my view, is a collaborative effort. It involves the entire community. So we have some ways to do that, to make to engage the community and get their input, not just so that we're informing about what we're doing, but also bring them into the fold in terms of making it an overall collaborative effort to the entire community. So I think that's important as well. I sent out, I think it was Thursday, I sent out a draft communications plan. Now that's just something I came up with pretty quickly on my own, obviously, because we don't have a team here right now. It's based on sort of a communications plan that I would do with other projects that I do with the town. So once we have a team put together, we can take a look at that a little more closely, decide what kind of ideas would work to get our messages out, what things we need to add. We can be as creative as we want in that aspect. But the idea to send that out to everybody now was just to give you a sense of the different sort of tools I have that we have with the town, and the different methods we can use to get our messages out as we work through this. Again, that subcommittee would take that plan and run with it, figure out which things work best, and add and take away as needed. So timelines, as you notice, if you did take a look at the plan, timelines in the right-hand column are sort of up in the air right now. We've already started a few things. I think the next item on the agenda, Natalie's going to cover some timelines with the work plan. So that will decide some of the timelines of a communications plan, obviously. So for now, I guess we need to figure out who's interested in being part of a subcommittee. I'm not sure if I need answers tonight or if we were looking for that. I know Jane was interested. She did express interest to me through email, so I think she's on board, but that's about it for now. I just wanted to see if there was any other interest. If not, you can email me. If you don't know now, I should say you can email me. It's not a big deal tonight.
I will open the floor if there's an interest for volunteers and call for nominations for anybody that's interested in helping Mike on the communication subcommittee. I'll open that floor now. There's some people I like to nominate, but I'd first like to call on volunteers. Lori, Tracy, do you think this is something you'd like to get into? Tanya?
Yeah, I could definitely volunteer for that. I'd be interested in being part of a subcommittee.
Okay, so Tracy's interested. Does everybody? I would like to have one more. Lori, are you interested?
I think so. Yeah, I could.
You could? Okay. So I have two nominations on the floor, Tracy and Lori, to work with Mike on the communications subcommittee. You can expect to see Jane and I and Natalie and maybe even Sherry in there to help every now and then. But this will be your subcommittee, Mike. Tracy and Lori, do I have a vote in favor? Or I should say all those in favor. 1. Okay, let me put it to you this way. Anybody against? No. Okay, Tracy and Lori, if Mike can reach out to those two after the meeting, is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, for sure. I think we can do a lot of our work through email. We can do this format as well, but we can do a lot of our work through email, and I'll reach out to you about that tomorrow. Jane did express interest as well, so
Yeah.
just for the record, I'm going to add her on.
And I have no problem with Jane jumping in. It's just that I also know that Jane is going to be working on the audit committee, and that's going to be a big one.
True.
So if Jane wants to chime in and jump in on that too, I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Mr. Chair, may I comment?
Pardon me?
It's Gil. May I comment?
Okay, sure.
Just for clarification purposes, it would be my understanding typically that the chairperson would be an ex officio member of all subcommittees.
Right. That's my understanding too. But I just, in order to keep in the fold of what's going on, I may drop in on the occasional meeting. I may not. I just like to be kept in the fold of what's happening. Correct?
That would be my understanding, yes.
Yep. Okay, moving on. Moving to 7D. This goes to Natalie, and we're going to talk about the timeline. And if Natalie, if you could just explain also the extension that was recently given to us and the why. I understand some people missed that.
So in January, the province, the Accessibility Directorate, provided an extension to the public municipalities. So instead of our deadline to provide our accessibility plan being April 1st of 2021, that's been extended to April 1st of 2022. So when we last met, I showed you this plan, which would have been in violation of that original date being April 1st. And so this revised plan, I think Mike is going to try to get it back on the screen for me. It reflects a planning conversation with the chair, Steve, and vice chair Jane, and Sherry, the secretary. So the elements of activity have not changed. What has changed in some cases is just the length, the duration for the event. So, for example, the first one is we've already completed establishing a committee. Tonight, I hope to get the go-ahead that this will be our baseline plan, and that each committee meeting, then I would provide an update. Then next in the conversation, which I think needs some engagement from the committee here, is to host a community engagement session. And originally we had identified it would be kind of a town hall type of engagement, but I think there should be discussion at this committee, given still we're in that COVID situation with public health directives. How would you suggest that this be accomplished? And then we've tentatively put a placeholder date for May, when we need to discuss if that date is reasonable and what the plan is around that. Then an awareness session, again, we put in with council, we put in a placeholder for June, and this requires some discussion as well. One of the things that was described in the Wolfville session was to have a wheelchair experience for counselors. But again, in speaking with Steve, Sherry, and Jane, Steve and Jane, who have some mobility issues, they have some thoughts on that. So I think that is something that between the community engagement and the awareness session, this committee really needs to discuss the intention and how to accomplish that to get the best output. The next one is for staff to have the Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility training. So tonight, I'd like to formally introduce you to one of my new staff. Francois Legrandeur is the junior building official / bylaw enforcement officer. He has completed the training for Rick Hansen as well as Glenn Muse, who's our building official. And Francois will be taking the course to be certified. So he, along with Glenn, along with Jane, will be the audit team. If we can kindly just move to page 2, Mike. Thank you. The next line, and again, these are all the major milestones. When you read the Accessibility Municipal Toolkit, these are the main deliverables within that will then create the accessibility plan document. So then the next thing we have is conduct audit. We've put that to May through January. One of the things that was brought up in the planning session is that the audits, especially in the outdoor environment, should also take place during not so great conditions like snow, like rain, because a person with accessibility challenges will experience all of those things. So the audit would be very important. So we've pushed that to January. Obviously, they can be done earlier if those conditions. And then the last one is releasing the plan. And this is really taking all of the table of contents of what is required to be in the plan, and that we have to be intentional that each month we're chunking away at each of those things as a committee. And then obviously the largest part will be doing getting the results of the audit, the assessment reports, and then putting those into what are the actions that are required. I just want to go back because I don't know if we had clarity around this from our last meeting. The accessibility plan is for buildings and public spaces and the streetscape built environment for the town. So this plan does not cover private buildings, private property. So I just want to make sure that there's some clarity around. It doesn't mean that the content of this plan could and the audits could not be used for other groups outside of this. Any questions or comments? I'd be happy to discuss.
Okay, is everybody in understanding of the plan? And once again, we were talking about, I believe, Natalie, that and Sherry can chime in on this, but we were talking about, in order to get everything done, changing the meetings to once a month, were we not?
Yes, I believe, Peter, do you have anything to add to that about the frequency, or perhaps anyone else?
It seems we've lost Peter, but okay, we'll move on from that. Last questions for Natalie before we move on. Okay, Natalie, do you have anything further to add to 7.8, the table of contents?
So the table of contents really is in that plan. Maybe if Mike, again, if I can indulge you just to pull up the link and go to the section that'll be about the table of contents for an accessibility plan. You'll have to probably scroll down a bit. So there, the plan that's laid out, or the table of contents that's been suggested by the Accessibility Directorate, is similar to what you've seen in the Lunenburg draft that I circulated, and it's also a link in this agenda. And previously, you'll see on your Get Involved site, it's the Wolfville plan. So it's it's basically that same plan, but there's some effort that we need to do in advance, and perhaps I would suggest to the chair and the committee that that can be one of the items for our next agenda, and that is, if Mike could, it's about building that what is our intention.
What is our attention? Yes, actually.
So it
I
actually
have it in my notes to ask Mike if he could, in his committee, look at a statement of purpose, or in this case, an intention of purpose, maybe during one of their first or second meetings.
I would suggest that that's something that we want to do as a committee, because everybody should participate in that exercise. So Mike, you'll have to scroll down a little bit further, where it's about designing the plan, and it'll be after the learning together event. And just the next page. So this is the page. Scroll up, please, again. Back one page. So this is the layout of the document. So generally, you have a welcome message from the committee chair, and we'll work with Steve, and then that comes back to the committee. Then you'll have an introduction, and the three parts that we need to look at as a town is what we believe in, promoting accessibility awareness, and then there's just a standard glossary of terms. So there's some good examples from Wolfville and Lunenburg, and there are other municipalities. If you'd like, staff can bring that back to the next committee meeting as part of the agenda to show those examples, and we do a mini workshop to craft what we believe and the promoting accessibility awareness. So those are things that needs to happen immediately. And then the areas of focus, as Steve had just mentioned, number one is we need to get the audits in place so that we can look at what our gaps are. And then we have to look at it, what our current state is for each of those items. So it'll be like, what is our commitment? The starting point is where we are today, an overview of, let's say it's the transit system, or let's say it's some area in the parks and recreation. So we need to craft the current day. So this is the work that staff will be doing, is to identify the current state and then do the audit, come back with the assessment, which will then show us the gaps. And then as the committee, it's about identifying what the actions are and then establishing the priorities, which will become the recommendation as the whole plan to go back to council. So we'll walk through each step as we move along in future meetings, but we first have to start with the what we believe and promoting accessibility awareness.
Okay. I think basically the executive will get together and start brainstorming on that. However, if anybody has any thoughts or suggestions on that, please send me an email, send Natalie an email. We'd love your input. Okay, can I move on to 7F? Okay, 7F is just as we looked at, it was, as Natalie was explaining, it is to look in the audit of properties. This, you should have received an audit of property list. Also, you should have received phase 1 recommendations to built environment. These are going to be, these two pieces are going to be pivotal in our audits of buildings, sidewalks, etc., along with, and I'm not French, so I hope I get his name right, Francisco, the new I believe, am I correct? He's going to be the new town at, what I'm looking for, building inspector? Is that
Good
correct?
evening,
Matt?
team. Yeah, Francois. Yeah. New hire since Monday last week. So definitely I'm drinking from a fire hose, trying to come up to speed. So the purpose of the audits, in a very broad stroke way of describing it, is to establish a baseline compared to the built environment best practices that are out there, and also to compare them with the universal design. So we have a lot of very official and recognized references that we can look at to compare what we have in the area and the services that we provide, buildings, and also outdoor areas for the users. From there, we'll be able to literally measure where we come short of different standards and offer some suggestions. But then again, for structures that are already existing, we have a very wide range of things we can and can't do. I'll give you an example. Cosmetic things are relatively easy to change, where structural things may need to be part of a longer term solution or planning. Having said that, we've been supplied with a very nice extensive list of, once we look at the list there, either businesses or areas, buildings that need accessibility audit. And from there, we'll be able to provide what can be done short-term, medium-term, and long-term. I think that probably answers your question.
Okay, yeah, it does, and it also looks like a lot of work. The thought, again, that we had as an executive was to form a subcommittee once again on this, because as you can see, it's going to be a lot of work, not for just someone that's on a full-time staff, but even for individuals that are like us that are volunteering our time. We're looking at a lot of work here. It's, again, speaking with Jane is very educated on this matter. She's been bringing me up to speed on some of the issues. I look forward to finding out how the phase 1 literature compares with the Rick Hansen Foundation checklist or standards, and seeing if, I'm assuming they're going to be reasonably compatible. However, I'd like to form a subcommittee on this to help out, but before I say that, we were also talking about the idea that at least everybody on the committee should walk through at least one audit. I know there's not going to be a lot of volunteers for people to go to, say, the compost facility or the water treatment facility, but I think I'm a firm believer of committee members getting involved. And I would just extend this out to say that if you are interested, when we start the audits, on going through a walkthrough on one of the buildings or one of the parks, playgrounds, or whatever, please let us know. I think it would be an educational experience as well as an eye-opening experience as far as working with people with accessibility issues. I know I, for one, am certainly going to volunteer to walk through at least a few. With that said, I'm going to ask, do you want more help? Do you want us to form a subcommittee to help you? I know Jane has pretty much already been appointed to that because she has the experience, as where we don't.
Stephen, if this question is directed at me, definitely more help is always welcome. Having said that, I can probably arrange to have a very broad stroke presentation for next meeting to give the committee and the members here tonight an idea of the involvement of an audit. Unless individuals have been exposed to the rating system of the Rick Hansen Foundation, which is hand in hand works with the CSA standard, which is also working hand in hand with the Universal Design Standard, which is, you know, more than just Canadian standard, it's worldwide standards. So having said that, it may be better to just demonstrate broad strokes of a rating result report, just sharing screen like we're doing right now. And then maybe, you know, it would expose our personnel or teammates here with the language involved. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so maybe, yeah.
So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this over as far as any help goes to next meeting and ask you to do just that, to make a presentation of what we're looking at. Because for me, an audit, I know nothing about audits. I'm not a carpenter. I'm not an engineer. My audit experience is basic, simply on reading. So if you could talk to us more about that next meeting, I look forward to learning.
Perfect. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Would you believe me if I told you we're at the end of our list? I will make just brief comment on other things that have been given us. If you look under additions, there, the Lunenburg County Accessibility Plan is a draft. It's good reading as far as, but it's similar to the Wolffield Plan in the fact that it outlines what is going to be the components of our plan as well. The Lake Milo assessment, I gotta be honest, there was no surprise there as one that uses the facilities. There was no surprise in the report. I don't know if we will re-audit that. I don't know what the procedure is. As where it was just audited, it's a pretty thorough audit, I thought. But I'm sure Francisco will be going over that audit. The Accessibility Act Essentials video. We still got time. Mike, can you bring that up and play it?
Sorry to interrupt, but Chair, that is the video that of the information that Carla presented in our first meeting. I just wanted people to know that they could re-look at that video. It's probably about 30 minutes.
Absolutely. Okay, then we won't go into that. If you want to know more about how this committee came into being, why it came into being, why this is an issue now, I strongly suggest you go look at that video from Carla. I had the opportunity to sit in on the meeting. It was very good. It'll run you about 30, 45 minutes, and it'll give you a really good background as to how we got to where we are today. The Nova Scotia Accessibility Advisory Board press release, that is what it is. And as we mentioned before, phase 1 recommendations to built environment, that will come up more and more in our audits. So that said, we're a little bit early before 8:30, so I'm going to open the floor up for any questions, concerns. Natalie, go ahead.
So in reading the toolkit that we were scrolling through a little bit earlier, on the Learning Together, there was actually an interesting discussion there, or I should say text. and it was about using the meetings here to have some public engagement. So Wolfville has it as part of their standing agenda before they start the business of the meeting to have either a public organization or an individual, either with a disability or representing those with disabilities, to speak on their experience or their organization. So part of the committee here would be able to hear firsthand. So one of the things that they did is they actually had at each meeting, and they allotted a certain amount of time, similar to what we do at the town's committee of the whole, where even a member of the committee can speak to 5 minutes about their firsthand experience, or we can request other organizations outside of the committee to do so. So I thought that would be a great learning opportunity should the committee wish to have that as part of a standing agenda.
Yes, we did talk about this, and I'm sorry, I did totally forget. I didn't make notes on it, so that's probably why I forgot. One of the things that Wolfville did and other communities have done is they've allotted right at the top of their meeting sort of an open mic session, I guess other people would refer them to, for people to talk about issues that they are having with regards to accessibility. And I think it's a great idea. I totally believe in public feedback and public involvement. So starting next meeting, there will be a block allotted. How long that block will be a maximum of 30 minutes. However, each person will only get 3 to 5 minutes. So I'm going to send this out to the community as a whole. If you know of someone that would like to speak about their accessibility issues in the town of Yarmouth, please invite them to our next meeting. If they wish to speak either by letter, email, or any other form, please make arrangements with me or with Natalie or any one of us to make that happen. Gail has a statement or question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just actually, I wouldn't mind sharing my experience briefly when I became the general manager at the Mariner Center, and the fact that I walked into a building that had a number of accessibility issues and the difficulty we had in overcoming those. Number one is how they were identified, but number two is the difficulty we experienced, because a lot of it was budget related. So I wouldn't mind taking 5 minutes of your time at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Gail. And that's exactly what we're looking for, are people to talk about what they are experiencing in real life. Any more comments, questions, or concerns?
Mr. Chair, it's Derek Lesser.
Hi.
I'm just wondering about getting some communications out, maybe through Mike, around small issues that people notice in the community, and maybe an easy way to address those with, like, we have See, Click, Fix, which you can report issues on. It seems to work really well. I know I reported a few things on Water Street with gardens that had overgrown on the sidewalk, and the next day the town Public Works were there cleaning it up. I know, like, Daryl LeBlanc from Credit Union one day noticed a few bricks on the sidewalk that were sticking up that were an obstacle in the way, and the crew came out and fixed it right away. But I'm just wondering, I know it's a hard piece to get out to the community, but I'm just wondering if maybe this group could maybe get some communications out around ways to report smaller issues that, that may be impacting accessibility.
Mike, can you field that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good idea, Derek. So from time to time, I remind people about See, Click, Fix. I mean, a lot of people know about it and some people don't. And we try to remind people that to use it whenever they see any kind of issue, whether it's accessibility or anything at all. But this could be something to add in this communications plan, that the subcommittee can talk about ways to promote it from an accessibility point of view. You know, I guess it's putting that angle on it to remind people, you know, if you see something that's, you know, a barrier, or there's an issue with a sidewalk or something, I'm just throwing things against the wall here, this tool is something that you can use to report that to us, for sure. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, we can do something with that.
I would just like to add, Chair, that just to piggyback on what Councillor Lesser said, is that, you know, we always have to think about not everybody has a cell phone or that they're savvy in using that. So we always want to have also snail mail. And maybe one of the things, Mike, we can talk about is putting a sandwich board outside of Town Hall to say, you know, See, Click, Fix, you can come in or go on your phone. So again, to make sure that people know they can pick up the phone or they can come into Town Hall. Maybe we need to have some paper complaint forms, or they just speak to front reception, and then of course See, Click, Fix using the app there. So try to make it as inclusive as possible, not just technology driven.
Absolutely.
Yep, for sure.
I think it's important too, when we communicate the message of when we're trying to engage about accessibility in our town, also try to reach individuals about the positive things that are actually working either in our town or in other areas. Because, you know, instead of reinventing the wheel, it's often really nice to hear what people really do appreciate. And, you know, I hear often different big box stores are having low sensory hour shopping and things like that. And that is a really positive experience for a lot of people. So if there's a way when we communicate what we're looking for, you know, issues in our community, we can also communicate that we're looking at for what things are actually working.
Tracy, we love to talk about positive things, trust me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy. That's an excellent point.
It does actually encourage other people to start thinking about the things that are working and that do make their life a lot better for them that we wouldn't necessarily consider. So if, you know, I just read in Chester, actually, their arena also has like a sensory, low lighting, low sensory music skating hour. So that was really interesting for our respite service provider had shared that around on Facebook. So things like that are really positive. They're going around in other communities and they're happening here as well. So if we can build on what we're doing well and encourage people to come forward to let us know that those are positive things to them, I think that would be, you know, we can build upon that.
I'd just like to add on what Tracy said. Often I find that the reason people don't assess these or don't access these free skating that's low sensory is because we don't know about them. Like Natalie has already said, even with technology, it still is easy to miss things. I would like at the end of this, maybe a pamphlet or a Facebook page listing the services that are available for people with accessibility issues in the town of Yarmouth, so that people know where to go and find help or find services that they need.
Yep, all good ideas.
Tracy, is such a list available? It's Natalie.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute.
Is such a list?
I don't know per se if there's a one generic list out there, but I certainly have avenues where we find that information. So I don't know, Steve, if that's something that you want us, maybe we can compile things that are going on like that in our community and other communities that would be, we could piggyback on. And we could communicate that as well with our platform.
Yeah,
I
just
certainly don't want to pile on Mike's workload, but I think it would actually be a very good idea. And I'm going to even go as far to say for people like the Hope Organization, YACRO, and others to know what's out there and a quick reference guide to what's out there. Some time ago, I took a course on mental health in the workplace or mental health first aid. In that, we got what is called a help guide or a help tree, it was called, and it listed if you were having legal services, financial issues, or whatnot. Bang, 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 quick list, laminated, everything of where you could go and get help. And there was at least 6 different categories. If anybody wants this, I'll find it. I'll send it to you for comparison. But I think it would be interesting to duplicate that from an accessibility point of view. Thoughts?
Natalie, Chair, I think it's always better to have more information than no information. But just going back to how to share information, one of the things that I've personally had success with is when there's new news is I have a distribution list, an email distribution list, and then I can send out the information. So even simple as, we have a C-click fix and what does it do and how does it support public engagement to solve problems. If we had a distribution list of all of the organizations and committees that this information would be useful for, and I'm thinking Tracy and others, then when we do have communications as the communication plan, we can have that list as well. So we can also be tagging them in an email or whatever method makes sense. So having a distribution list would be of emails, et cetera, would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Okay, any more questions, comments, concerns, or ideas? Going once. Twice. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry if she would schedule our next meeting.
Hi, everyone.
Good.
We had talked about possibly meeting once a month. As far as the specific dates, I'm still not sure. I don't have access to any of the calendar of all the other town meetings, so I don't know where those conflicts would be. So I'm not sure, Natalie, if I would be the best to do that scheduling. What are your
well, we have right now on the call, Sherry, Councillor Gill and Councillor Derek, who are critical to attendance here. Are Monday nights good for you, Councillor Gill and Derek?
They work perfect for me. They just looking ahead a month. I think a month from now or close to that would be Easter Monday, but I guess the Monday after that would be the 12th. But Monday nights are good for me if they're good for Gil.
Yeah, actually, the only conflict I have, I'm on the school advisory committee for our council for the Meadowfield School, and typically those meetings are held on Monday evenings, and I believe the next one is actually scheduled for April 12th. It's but they're not. There's only 6 meetings through the year, so it wouldn't be, and it's not likely that they would always be a conflict. I think just because of the Easter break.
I do have a conflict on Mondays, but it's the 3rd Monday of each month. So as long as it's not the 3rd Monday, I'm good.
And I can probably, those meetings occur at 6 o'clock. So even if there was a conflict, I could probably jump in for 7 o'clock. So please don't schedule around me.
Okay, so should we tentatively kind of peg it to the first Monday of the month, except for April because that's Easter Monday. So we'll move to the 12th and have our next meeting on April 12th. Does that sound agreeable? Any other input about that?
I'm good with it.
I'm okay with it.
Very good. April 12th it is.
So Sherry, we can send out, if everybody is agreeable, for the next 3 or 4 months, just so you can have it in your agenda, that meeting invite. And then we would follow up as we get closer with the agenda and all of the other things. But at least so that you can book it in your calendar, we can send you the Microsoft Teams calendar invite as discussed here, if everybody's agreeable with that.
Sounds good to me.
Works for me. Any last comments or concerns? Next meeting will be April the 12th. Okay, well, I thank everybody for your time and your dedication. I do apologize, but the hard work's just beginning. But I think it could be quite interesting and quite educational, and personally, I look forward to it. Once again, if you have any questions, concerns, or thoughts, please don't hesitate to email any of us. I know Natalie is pretty available. I'm available to answer any questions or concerns. So if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. Other than that, I'm going to say good night and thank you all for being here.
Good night.
Thank you.